CD Projekt Red just gave us yet another update on Cyberpunk 2077, really on the future of the game overall. Yesterday, we looked at some of the news and details around the new update, the expansion trailer, and more. But today, we actually got a bit more of a unique perspective, as we were able to hear not from the community team, but instead from some of the executives during their earnings call, where they confirm concretely certain things that are and are not coming to the future of Cyberpunk. And it's here that we get concrete and official confirmation that Cyberpunk 2077 is only getting one expansion. Technically, this news came late yesterday in the YouTube comments of all places, but is more explicitly confirmed during this earnings call, where we actually get a pretty interesting answer over where the future of the franchise may be going.
We decided to develop one major expansion for Cyberpunk, which is going to take advantage of all the capabilities of the new-gen consoles. Having said that, we're totally fully committed to developing the Cyberpunk IP further. So beyond this particular Cyberpunk expansion which you just mentioned, we've put a lot of effort and time into building this franchise, and we definitely want to continue to build upon what was built right now with new stories, new experiences, new content, basically, not just the video game format. And I'll leave it here. So in terms of expansions, this is going to be just one major expansion. However, there's going to be new stuff in the future.
So to me, it definitely sounds like more Cyberpunk is coming, and it may not even be that far away. But perhaps they're alluding to something like a new movie or TV show in the works. I mean, the Edge Runners TV show, the anime they've been pushing that was closely associated with this recent update, isn't even out yet. But for me, after listening to that quote and hearing them talk about it, it definitely felt like something else is being worked on. It's not like something may come in the future, but no, something is going to get announced in the future because the deal is already done. And speaking of, they actually announced a future strategy update event, but we'll talk more about that later in this video. And they also clarify that this expansion is truly targeted around next gen and PC. It is not going to be available on last gen consoles. I think it'll be pretty interesting to see what comes to fruition with this. We may finally get to see Cyberpunk unlocked, what the devs could really do with the engine and the game, not having to worry about optimizations or performance quite as much as they did before, where that was a major concern. They don't really get into expansion release dates or release date timing, but they talk about how the expansion right now is at a very advanced stage of development, and how there's going to be a time in the future for further announcements around this. And just in general, how things are on track, so it doesn't seem like there's going to be any delays, although technically right now all we know is 2023. I'm personally hoping for something on the earlier side, like Q1 would definitely get me more hyped. And just broadly in the expansion, they describe how it's going to be pretty major and the price will reflect that. They don't get into pricing or really the scale or size of this content, but it definitely feels like it's going to be a meatier one. So perhaps even a bit more expensive and larger than some of the Witcher expansions, but technically nothing is confirmed. Although this is very likely not the end of the Cyberpunk franchise, and one of the other things they talk about during this call is...
Hey, what about my world?
What is this? Is this some kind of kids game?
That is not true. Hero Wars has vibrant graphics, cool gameplay, and a user-friendly interface.
Well, then I guess it's an incredible time to talk about today's video sponsor, Hero Wars. In Hero Wars, you'll be able to find the perfect character to suit you. There's aliens, cyborgs, furries, and even vampires all present here. One of my personal favorites is Chaba, who's going to be a tank that will quite literally chomp your enemies to death. But Celeste is a close second, being able to switch from her DPS dark form to a healer light form, making her viable in almost all situations, and she even has some pretty awesome new skins. There's no other game quite like Hero Wars. It's very easy to jump into, and you can play it literally everywhere, from your lecture hall to even the subway. But assembling that perfect team is an art form. For example, Mojo the Shaman can't heal Dark Star quite as efficiently as the wonderful Grandma Martha can, but there are other great synergies like Slow Cleaver with Swift Isaac. Hero Wars is a world of 6 unique modes, more than 300 Guild Wars servers, and 100 million players. And you can play by yourself or see who among your friends is the top dog. And where can you get 30,000 coins, 600 emeralds, and 5 awesome heroes to start dominating in Hero Wars right away? Well, by clicking on that very conveniently placed link in the video description. And make sure to play Hero Wars now. But looking back at Cyberpunk, one of the things consistently referenced during this stream, and you even heard it during that quote, was Cyberpunk being described as a franchise.
We've put a lot of effort and time into building this franchise.
Nothing super concrete, but they just kept mentioning it. Now, of course, this could just be in reference to what other form of media is coming, but I actually have another theory. I think this could be connected to Molasses Flood. Molasses Flood is a separate studio that CDPR acquired nearly a year ago now, in October of 2021. We don't know exactly what the Molasses Flood is working on. They definitely have a particular style of video game they've worked on in the past, but earlier in 2022, CDPR made it clear that they are working on a project on one of CD Projekt Red's existing IPs, aka aka The Witcher or Cyberpunk. Likely not a full entry in either of these franchises. I don't think they're going to get the next Cyberpunk game, but obviously it's involved in one of those franchises. We know that CDPR right now is working on a new Witcher project, so it doesn't seem that crazy that the Molasses Flood could be working on something Cyberpunk related. And during this earnings call, they describe how CDPR has actually had developers from their studio working with the Molasses Flood on this project. And they even bring special attention to the fact that the Molasses Flood has nearly tripled in size since they were acquired in 2021. Obviously, we don't really know what they're working on as of right now, but it's definitely interesting, and they definitely have been growing. This employee breakdown gives us a few other interesting insights though. We can see how during 2022, the number of developers on Cyberpunk has actually stayed consistent. We heard just yesterday how they're adding things like a police system and vehicle combat in the future in another update. And the reason I highlight the devs staying consistent here is on pretty much every other update we've gotten to the employee breakdown, there have been less people working at Cyberpunk. This yellow bar has gotten smaller. But from the last earnings call to this one, that yellow bar has stayed exactly the same size, which does feel like something. The amount of people that were working on patch 1.6 will be roughly the same amount of people that are probably working on patch 1.7. And we could even see during that same time frame, the number of developers on the Cyberpunk expansion went up slightly. And updates on all of this could be coming shortly, as during this, CDPR announced that in October they will host another strategy update, where they're going to be talking about their future plans for the company and the business outlook overall. We could definitely see some new announcements or even release date reveals during this. Now, don't expect anything like E3. This is definitely a business-focused event, but it still is interesting. You get a rough idea of when some of these things are going to be coming out, or even an update on the roadmap for CD Projekt's future titles. If you remember, it was actually a bit of a similar situation with how they revealed the new Witcher Saga game that was on the horizon, but actually speaking of that, they also talk about The Witcher. The next-gen version of The Witcher 3 finally gets a more concrete release date. They confirm it is coming in Q4 of 2022, so before the end of this year, we'll be able to finally play that. And they talk broadly about the Witcher Saga. CDPR describes how, to them, the first Witcher Saga was The Witcher 1, 2, and 3, and now, as they're planning this new game, they're really looking at it as multiple games on the horizon. This is going to be the start of the second saga in the Witcher universe, so there's going to be multiple titles associated with this story. They don't give any concrete numbers, but you have to imagine it'll be at least 3 titles just like it was with the first saga. They talk a bit about the Epic agreement. If you didn't see this news, CD Projekt Red signed a deal with Epic Games to use Unreal Engine for all of their future titles. In fact, the Cyberpunk expansion will be the last thing done on Red Engine, the engine they've been using for years now. They mentioned how going into that deal with Epic, they really evaluated their future plans for the company overall, and they decided that Unreal Engine would be a perfect match for those future plans. This is pretty high level and doesn't really clarify all that much, but I still think it's a pretty interesting comment, because two of the things that stand out to me as being potential different things in the future of CDPR is they clearly wanted to bring multiplayer to their games. There was going to be an effort to bring multiplayer not only to Cyberpunk, but also seemingly to The Witcher 3 at one point. They're going to do this over time. So on one hand, they may have just abandoned those multiplayer plans altogether, but to me, they likely were just abandoned on Red Engine and instead shift to development of multiplayer with Unreal Engine. So I wouldn't be shocked if some of these new and upcoming games do actually feature multiplayer, and maybe even multiplayer on day one. But even beyond that, as we did just see modding tools come out for Cyberpunk 2077, I wouldn't be shocked if one of their other plans is to take a note out of Bethesda's book and have advanced moddability for their games going forward. The Witcher 3 and Cyberpunk have very active modding scenes, and perhaps with Unreal Engine they could do a bit more here. Either way, we'll probably start to get some answers on all of that next month when they actually give us that strategy update in October. Speaking of mod tools though, they do have a pretty interesting quote when it comes to the release of Red Mod. They mention how, thanks to this, it is finally possible to modify practically every system and any aspect of the game being Cyberpunk, and it opens up countless possibilities. One of the things that's been popping up in the wake of Red Mod being revealed and really released for everyone to use is people overhyping or overestimating what it could actually do. There are lots of comparisons to Bethesda games. Skyrim in particular seems to be a big target of this, and the simple reality is you cannot mod Cyberpunk 2077 to nearly the degree you can mod Skyrim right now. These modding tools will make many of the existing processes easier, simpler, and make it so you could get into modding Cyberpunk a lot more easily now than you could previously. And in particular, on the front of animation mods, there's a lot that is possible, but it's not like there's a whole new world of opportunity here. Things like quest mods are still largely impossible, it seems. So making comparison to Bethesda games right off the bat feels pretty moot because, of course, in Bethesda games you have lots of quest mods, but in Cyberpunk that literally can't happen even with these new tools. Red mod is still incredibly exciting and it'll likely lead to a lot more and a lot better mods for Cyberpunk in the future, but to me it definitely feels like members of the community and even during the earnings call things were getting hyped up a little bit too much here. Although of course on this front I would absolutely love to be proven wrong. More mods for Cyberpunk and more modding abilities is only a good thing. With that said, that's a recap of everything that was talked about during the earnings call, everything that stood out to me, and another little update on Cyberpunk and its future. Hopefully you guys found this one informative or just interesting. I will have a full video on patch 1.6 and all of the incredible things coming with it coming out tomorrow. There's a lot to dig through. As always again though, I thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed this one and I hope to see you all next time. Later.